Hey, so it's Jasmine. I'm here to talk about why lesson and unit planning really matter. And over here it says it's kind of a big deal. And lesson and unit planning is a huge part of effectively teaching a lesson, delivering content to students, and making sure that, unit goals and objectives and curriculum objectives, are met. So we'll just go over a few things that I kind of jotted down about, the effectiveness of unit planning, how a teacher's planning is actually reflected in their lesson, some of the most effective lessons that I've ever seen, and kind of, the things that made them effective, as well as just a reflection of my own personal experiences with lesson and unit planning. So first we'll start with how teachers' planning is reflected in their lessons. It's very obvious when a teacher has effectively planned or when they have not effectively planned. Classrooms look completely different when a teacher has taken the time to kind of plan for misconceptions, to differentiate instruction, to plan activities which all the students are engaged, activities that are student-centered and not just teacher-focused. And when a teacher has not effectively planned, you can totally see students who are off task, a loss of instructional time, students who are disengaged, and also an increase in off-task behavior and challenging behavior because the students are not engaged in the lesson, so they're spending their time finding something else to do. Let's see, just checking out my notes over here. It also leads to a lot of frustration in the classroom when the teacher has not effectively planned. Frustration on behalf of the teacher and frustration on behalf of the students because of that idle time, for the students who are in class, who are prepared, who are engaged in the lesson when, the off-task behavior is occurring. That breaks their focus and and their attention, and everyone in the classroom really becomes frustrated. And overall, it leads to a negative classroom climate. There's not a lot of effective teaching or learning that goes on in a classroom with that, that's experiencing poor planning. However, when teachers do take the time to plan effectively, teachers really are able to kind of, like I mentioned earlier, they can plan for misconceptions. They can kind of think about, okay, what will the student get from this lesson? What will they not get from this lesson? What could they be confused about? Teachers can plan engaging, small group activities, one-on-one activities, direct instruction, and kind of they can make sure that they, reach out to all students at different levels. That they can differentiate the content based on the academic content, the product that the students are going to deliver, how the content is actually delivered to the students. And just overall, teachers have a better grip and a better handle on what goes on inside of their classroom when they have taken the time to think ahead of time. Some of the most effective lessons I've seen, I've taught mostly early childhood, throughout my entire teaching career, but I've had the pleasure of, observing some really talented teachers all throughout early childhood, as well as elementary and high school. Some of the most effective lessons that I've ever seen were at the elementary school level. A teacher in particular that I remember, she just did a great job of keeping all the students engaged. She used a lot of whole brain teaching methods. She would kind of have the students, celebrate themselves whenever they answered a question correctly. The entire class was engaged in the process. There was really no opting out. Students didn't have a chance to kind of shy away and, be off task or anything like that. One thing that I think really made her lessons effective is that she did frequent and varied checks for understanding. So this was a first grade classroom. So sometimes they might do exit tickets, but a lot of times they would do kind of like whole brain teaching methods to check for understanding. So she'd have everyone maybe give her a thumbs up. She'd ask a question and have everyone who understood or who could answer the question, provide a thumbs up. Or she might have them do a turn and talk quickly with their partner sitting next to them. Just checking out my notes again. She also encouraged a lot of collaboration in the classroom. Students, there was some homogenous grouping that happened in the classroom, but the students, worked in different rotations. So each student every single day had an opportunity to work with at least two different peers on the same ability level, or a lower or higher ability level. And I think that collaboration, one, brought about a sense of respect and community in the classroom, because there was the students never felt like, those are the smart kids and those are the kids who are not smart. Everyone got to work together and learn from each other, and I think that really enabled learning to be shared inside of the classroom. A lot of her lessons were student-centered. The students were active participants in what they were learning and how they were learning it. It wasn't just her standing at the front of the room teaching at them, and them taking, notes or anything like that. They were up, they were physically involved, moving around, getting the learning through their whole body. It was very hands-on. She always had some kind of engaging, like whether it was a do now or a mini lesson, some kind of tactile, activity to kind of get them involved, to kind of introduce or reinforce the concept that they had been talking about. As well as she differentiated instruction, like we mentioned, by content, process, or product. Additionally, she also used her classroom. This was a first grade classroom, and they had a paraprofessional in this classroom. And she used her paraprofessional in really integral ways. It wasn't like the paraprofessional, just kind of stood to the side and was the behavior management piece in the classroom. The paraprofessional worked alongside with her in small groups and in those rotations, so that the teacher and the paraprofessional got to work with all the students, on the same day on whatever the content was. Some of the checks for understanding that I meant, like I mentioned before, having the students give a thumbs up if they can kind of understand what's going on in the classroom, or what the assignment is, what the activity is. Also, I've seen teachers they'll give an assignment to the students or directions to the students, and they'll ask the students to repeat the directions back to them in their own way. So giving the students an opportunity to make sure that, one, they understand the content, but to deliver, to explain themselves in their own way, so that it's on their level, it makes sense to them. Teachers I've also seen exit tickets, as mentioned before. I've also seen turn-in talks in the classroom. My own experiences with lesson and unit planning have been pretty fun. Like I mentioned, I've taught early childhood for the majority of my teaching career, and I've always taught through thematic units. The curriculum, I've used a couple different curriculums, the creative curriculum and also the tools of the mind curriculum. Both of these curriculums are play-based. They do teach through thematic units. While teaching with the creative curriculum, I was able to sort of plan out some of my own units. They did have units provided to us, but I was able to plan out some of my own units and kind of think about, well, what kind of incorporates student interest? What are my students talking about? What are they interested in? And kind of weave that into the academic content. As well as in tools of the mind, we have some curriculum units which are planned out for us. But what I really love about it is that there's still flexibility and there's still room to incorporate student interest. And I think that's one of the most important things, especially in early childhood, because as students get older, their necessary interest or input isn't always considered in curriculum. There are as so many schools and states are moving towards the Common Core and adopting the Common Core. Students really won't have the opportunity to say what they would like to learn about or what they're interested in and engage in. There are all these standards that the students are required to meet. So in early childhood, it's really important to engage the students and build on what they are already interested in. They come in with all this background knowledge and all these experiences, so it's important to kind of, in my planning, to consider those things that they already know and figure out how I can embed academic content and make connections to those experiences that they already have. Overall, lesson and unit planning are an integral part of being an effective teacher. These plans set the foundations for the academic content that you wish to deliver to students over short and long-term periods. Planning helps teachers to identify the breadth and depth of students' learning and also allows teachers to identify any and all prerequisite skills that the students may need to successfully achieve the goals identified in the unit. It is also important to note that lessons may not always happen the way that they've been planned, and an effective teacher has to revisit the plan based on changes in student interest, curriculum requirements, student understanding, or actually scheduling. The important thing to do when lessons don't always go according to plan is to be open, flexible, and introspective. Lesson planning is not the only important tool in teaching. However, it does lay a solid foundation upon which you can build your teaching. My personal experience with lesson planning in early childhood has involved a lot of tapping into the interests of my students and making curriculum connections to topics they are already drawn to. Additionally, lesson planning in early childhood has afforded me the opportunity to engage in lots of play-based, hands-on, and engaging activities where students don't even realize that they are learning. And that's about it. And the effectiveness of lesson and unit planning.